Lifeguards. Everyone loves lifeguards on TV, in the movies, on ocean beaches, but we rarely see them in our travels to Great Lakes beaches, even though we have millions of residents and visitors each year attracted to our 10,000 miles of shoreline. And even though we know that lifeguards save lives. Hi everyone, I'm Jamie Reckler from Great Lakes Water Safety, and welcome to our bonus virtual water safety jam session on advocating for more lifeguard programs to help people safely enjoy the Great Lakes area. As you'll hear from our two rock star lifeguard panelists today, Scott Ruddle and Cheryl Podtburg, along with risk management expert Tim Jaskiewicz, lifeguards are a very worthwhile investment for any shoreline community, beach, or park. Far less expensive than search and rescue teams, dive teams, not to mention the immeasurable grief and suffering avoided by a rescue instead of a body recovery. While our traditional first responders respond as fast as they can when someone calls 911, it's often not fast enough to save someone from drowning, especially out in a lake. And even if they get to the beach fast enough, they might not be prepared to get into the water fast enough to help. You know, they've got their uniforms, they've got their guns, they can't just run right in. And in the meantime, untrained beachgoers may be tempted to try to rescue someone and they end up becoming drowning victims themselves. So thank you for joining us today. Thank you for joining our previous water safety jam sessions, either live or later on our YouTube channel. Thank you for following us on social media and to the media who cover water safety and help save lives. And thank you for the many compliments and nice notes encouraging us to keep up our important work. We have record high heat, record high water levels. The COVID-19 pandemic curve is unflattening fast, yet people are going to head to the beaches no matter what. We know that. So we have work to do to help keep them safe. So we are the Great Lakes Water Safety Consortium, and we have ambitious goals for 2020. 20% less drownings, 20% more members, more warning signs, more educational programs, more heroes recognized, more event attendees, and that includes these virtual events, more social media followers, more media mentions, more diverse board members, more donations, more sponsors, and more action committee members. And we're well on our way to accomplishing these goals despite this difficult year. And speaking of our action committees, and I know you want to hear from our speakers, I'm just going to be another minute, but I want to put in a plug up front for our many action committees where even though we have more than 800 members now, the core group where the real action happens is on these action committees. And I won't read them all off to you, but we have lots of them, lots of opportunities for you to not just receive our emails and e-newsletters, the WAVE, but to get more involved and volunteer and help out with water safety as much or as little as you can. And then I also want to thank our generous sponsors. Tremendous support for these events and for our ongoing initiatives. Our Illinois DNR Coastal Management Program, Kim, Illinois, Indiana Sea Grant, Michigan and Wisconsin Sea Grants, FastStar, and Wall Street Beach. I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to turn it over finally to our first speaker, Scott Ruddle, who is a lifeguard from Ontario, Canada, and he has been a presenter at many of our events over the years, and we're glad to have him here for this virtual event. And with that, Scott, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Jamie. I'm just going to go right to my share screen here. There we go.
Okay.
Excellent. You got it?
I'm sorry, Scott. Let me just say Mark Breederland is here again, kind of our co-host, and keeps everything on the rails for us. And he'll be monitoring the chat room and the Q&A and so on. Mark, sorry, go ahead.
Problem. Thanks again. Let's go back to Scott.
Hello, everyone. My name is Scott Ruddle, and I'm a lifeguard and a lifeguard instructor in the town of Grand Bend. It's a small community on the Ontario side of Lake Huron, where I've been working for 22 summers. I'm also an instructor, so I help to train people to be beach lifeguards. I'm also a strong advocate for lifeguards. I'll start off by just asking a simple question for you. If I can get my next slide there. Here we go. I'll ask you, would you send your kids to a school that didn't have fire extinguishers working or fire extinguishers in the cabinet in the hallway? And would you board a cruise ship that didn't have lifeboats? What about if you were going to fly across the ocean? Would you get onto a plane that didn't carry a defibrillator or an oxygen tank? And how would you react if your town mayor decided to cancel your volunteer fire service in order to save money, relying on, adjacent communities to help you out of a sticky situation? I'm pretty sure the majority of us would say no to all of those. However, why is it that communities do not want to put lifeguards on the beaches? Or when it comes to budget crunch time, it's one of the first things that they consider chopping. Well, I guess it comes down to liabilities. And when people are invited to a beach, when you put a parking lot, or you put a bathhouse with change rooms, when you put a picnic area and you invite people to come on down to the beach, if you have a sign on the highway that points to your beach and you are inviting them, it's as if you are a homeowner and you invite somebody over for a party in your backyard. You hope that the person who built your deck that your neighbors are going to sit on built it to a certain code and keeps people safe. Are you aware of hazards at your beach? Once again, if you know that you have a beach that has steep drop-offs, or you have currents or submerged objects, if you are aware of those things, then you don't pass that information on or help protect people from those hazards. Perhaps you are being willfully negligent in those actions. And once again, do you collect fees? Do you charge for parking? Do you charge a park entry fee or a usage fee? Well, I'm pretty sure after a while, the guests who come to your facility are going to request more than just a clean toilet and a garbage can. They're going to want to see safety measures in place for their visit. Many people will think that one of the easiest things to do is to put up a sign that says swim at your own risk. But that implies that the person reading that sign understands the risk. Also, in some jurisdictions, if you are below the age of 16, it doesn't matter if you can read the sign, it's whether or not you can understand that risk. So if you have a town where a group of 14, 15-year-old kids can hop on the bike and ride down to the beach for a day, they might not be, held liable for passing by a sign that they have to read. Also, how many signs do you require on that beach? Do you have multiple access points? Do you have just a great big long parking lot? And you would have to put a sign perhaps every 15, 20 feet. People often think that it's two choices. It's either signs and somebody drowns, or lifeguards and somebody drowns. But what they do not consider is there is the third choice. It's lifeguards and people do not drown. People are kept safe. People are rescued. What would you rather say at an inquest when you're on the witness stand? Would you rather say, we had a bunch of signs, yes, some of them had been vandalized with graffiti, but everybody should have walked past and read that sign? Or would you rather say, we have a lifeguard crew that was out there who gave multiple warnings to people that day to keep them safe, and when the incident occurred, our lifeguards responded, recovered the person, and gave their best at a resuscitation effort? There are costs for a drowning. There's cost of insurance. There's cost for a search. Coast Guard costs to put a helicopter and a boat out onto the water can run up to $35,000 a day for a Coast Guard response. And this does not include the land response of the police, fire, paramedics, and the municipal support services that respond as well. There's a cost to the community regarding bad publicity. You do not want to be the town that is known as having the beach where people drown. And as Jamie mentioned, there is a cost for the funeral, there is a cost to the loss of life to the family, and there's a cost of that individual's loss to his community as well, or her community, and what they brought to the community that they will not be able to bring if they drown. There are costs to a lifeguard service. There still is a cost of insurance, and there's the cost of wages and training. Different areas will pay their lifeguards different amounts. There's a cost of equipment and maintenance of that equipment. There's a cost for water testing and sanitation. However, that was probably done whether you had a sign or a lifeguard up in the stand. And there may be a cost for additional law enforcement to assist the lifeguards. When you have staff that are down there for a day and they see people breaking rules and causing problems, you might have more calls to law enforcement or by-law enforcement officers to come down and assist to keep the visitors safe at the beach. The benefits of a lifeguard team, and one that I forgot to put down, is guess what? It's a summer job for people. It is a job that teaches responsibility. It is a job that is physically fit and active. It is a job that allows people to go on to future careers in healthcare, future careers in teaching, and future careers in recreation management. The most of what a lifeguard does up there is prevention. They are up in the tower and they are whistling to people saying, hey, you've gotten too deep. They tell people, please don't swim in this area. You're next to a pier. You're near where a rip current is going to form. They educate people. Not only do they help educate people about the hazards of their beach, but they can pass on information on how people can survive when they're vacationing at other beaches. The most of my job, however, is public relations. I am a beach ambassador for my community. I will sit there and I will talk to people constantly through the day. I'll let them know where they can park. I'll let them know where they can get a great lunch. I'll let them know when the evening entertainment at the band shell is going to go on. I give out constant information, and that is something that is difficult for my bosses to measure and understand, is how much I do for our community. And finally, we perform rescues. Many times, rescues, we call it a rescue on my beach, but it involves more than one person being rescued at the same time. We have a much faster response time. I've already been scanning the water and looking for problems. I've been able to see people who are weak swimmers who are getting into deep water, and I can pay attention and draw other people's attention to it as well. And when they start to falter and go under, my response time to jump off the stand, run over and swim out can be a minute or less. That rescue response time will never be matched. Even if you have a fire department that is 3 minutes drive away, even if you have a police cruiser that is sitting in the back of the parking lot, it will take time for bystanders on the beach to find their cell phone. First of all, they have to recognize that somebody is even drowning, which is a difficult thing. And then they have to find their cell phone, make a 911 phone call, talk with the dispatcher and explain their location. The dispatcher has to alert and page out emergency crews. They have to travel to scene. And when they arrive at scene, they have to get out and get dressed into immersion suit and possibly don life jackets, stretch out a rope, and organize a search line. All of that takes time. And if that takes, in the best situation, 10 minutes, that's 10 minutes that somebody has been underwater, and the brain damage from the hypoxia they're experiencing, a portion of it will be permanent. And that's if they're recovered right away. Another thing is that lifeguards are able to do deep water searches, and deep water can be just over 4 feet. Seeing as the majority of rescue crews will only wade into about waist deep water, we're the lifeguards, we're the ones who will put on the face mask, snorkel, and fins and be able to cover a much greater area in an underwater search. We also, as Jamie mentioned, and I've alluded to, reduce the chance of additional victims when untrained rescuers try to help. And this can be bystanders on the beach, or this could be fire officers or police officers, paramedics, or somebody who tries to go out and they do not have the swimming skills or the flotation equipment available. The last thing I would say, if you're interested in starting up a beach lifeguard program, there are many options, whether you have actual lifeguards down there, whether you have a patrol that kind of sweeps back and forth. Maybe they do a couple of other things. They're not actually scanning the water, but they're on the beach and ready to respond. There's many different options of putting rescuers out on the beach. I think lifeguards are the best because not only will they be ready to do a rescue, but they're scanning and looking for those incidents as well. If you choose to set up a program, reach out to the Great Lakes Water Safety Consortium. We can help you out. We'll give you suggestions on assessing the beach. Get a hold of Google Maps, look at your municipal maps, make sure that you don't have any leftover land claim issues on the area that you're going to put lifeguards out on, and then assess the need. Figure out what are the days that are the busiest and the time periods that you want lifeguards down there. Lifeguards do need to go home and sleep at some point in time. Fortunately, we try and pick hours that there should be very few people on our beach, and law enforcement, or by law enforcement, once again, can help to maintain safety of patrons and visitors in the after hours. Come up with a policies and procedures manual, work out your budget, and then start worrying about recruitment, because turnover of lifeguards is constant. But by utilizing and tapping into aquatics programs in the area, or even starting a junior lifeguard program and getting people wanting to come and work at the beach is important. You'll have to do some training, and obviously you have to do administration. Some things that people don't consider after they start up a program is, where are we going to store all of our equipment in the off season? And finally, data tracking. I can't stress this enough. Get out there, keep numbers, check on trends, and that will help you advance your program and change it as the need arises in the future. We've just come through an extremely hot weekend. Our Canada Day was back last Wednesday, and then we had people down on the beach for the long weekend that was extremely hot. On Wednesday, the Grand Bend Beach Patrol performed 5 rescues, bringing 18 souls out of the water. Some of those people may have got out on their own or with some assistance, but I can tell you, some of them wouldn't have if it had not been for lifeguards responding and saving people. And that's why you didn't hear about drownings up in Grand Bend this past weekend. I'm going to stop there and save time for the other speakers, so I'll stop my share screen.
That was great, Scott. Thank you so much. You always provide so much insight. You're always so well prepared, and it's just a fire hose of great information that we're going to need to process. But if there are questions, put them in the chat, in the Zoom chat, and we're going to get to them after our other speakers. But why don't we move on then now to Cheryl Podtburg from Duluth. I'll let you introduce yourself and start your show.
Fantastic. First of all, thanks for allowing me to tell you how one of the coldest beaches on the Great Lakes system has lifeguards. Google tells me that the average temperature of Lake Superior is only about 40 degrees Fahrenheit, which is real cold. Surface temperature, of course, gets warmer than that, but our beach is pretty chilly. But this is one of the access points on our beach on Park Point in Duluth, Minnesota. Thank you to Ryan Tischer, who's an amazing local photographer who's allowing me to use this for all kinds of promotion. But I work for the Duluth Y in Duluth, Minnesota, and we are as far west on the Great Lakes system as you could possibly get. I've been working in aquatics and emergency response for over 25 years. I'm currently boat crew certified with the Coast Guard Auxiliary, and have been supervising the lifeguards on Lake Superior in Duluth since 2009, when the Duluth YMCA entered into a contract with the city of Duluth to provide those services. At that time, the park and rec budget had taken a huge slashing, and they had cut lifeguards from the beaches, along with about 169 city employees in August of the previous year. Most of what I'm going to talk about has nothing to do with liability, because states and cities in the US have so many differences in their laws and expectations that the best thing that I can do is to tell you to look at your state and your local laws and see where liabilities lie, and then figure out how to work within that. However, I can tell you that once is an accident and twice is a problem. So once you get to twice, your best bet to try to avoid any future liability is to do something differently. I can also tell you that signs are not the answer, because 32 million adults in the United States cannot read. That's not read English, that's cannot read anything. And that's 1 in 6 people that you come across. And that's adults. So, you know, going back to this picture, we've all seen pictures like that coming from our communities. Hey, this is gorgeous, please come here. Who do you think pays for those marketing campaigns? It's probably you if you patronize your local establishments. There's this great thing called tourism tax, and many states and cities around the Great Lakes system have tourism tax established. In the city of Duluth, it was established originally by state statute and city ordinance in 1969. These funds are designated for tourism-related uses to promote and support the city of Duluth as a tourist and convention destination. Currently, we have a 2.25% tax of tourism tax at any purchase made at a restaurant or bar, and a 3% tourism tax increase for hotel and motel bills. And that's in addition to any state and city taxes for sales. So a quick Google search of the Great Lakes states. Only 2 of them do not currently have tourism tax in place in the state. Some cities within those states have elevated levels as compared to the state level, but it's here. So why is it relevant? Last year, the parks manager for the city and I were going over the kind of the end of the season for us, and we came to the realization that a majority of the touch points that our lifeguards, our park rangers, and our fire department were all having with people on the beach were not with residents of our community, which means they're tourists. So she asked if I'd ever considered applying for tourism tax funds to help support the lifeguard program. No, I hadn't, because I had no idea that I knew there was extra taxes when I went to the restaurant in my town, but I didn't know what that was used for. So submitted an application and to obtain tourism tax dollars to completely fund our lifeguards for the 2020 season. I plan to expand our hours. I plan to increase the number of lifeguards that we had on the beach. I planned to help our fire department with real-time flag changes and do some additional training, get some equipment upgrades, and I was granted every single penny I asked for in the amount of $70,000. Really awesome. Then comes that newest 4-letter word in my world, COVID. Yes, I know it's 5 letters, but it's a new 4-letter word. Nobody is traveling to this beautiful city of Duluth. Nobody's going to Michigan, so there's no tourism tax being collected, or very little tourism tax being collected. But we still have managed through a ton of negotiation to get some funds to at least be able to provide some weekend services to our community for this current season. But the door has been opened, and we plan to apply again to provide lifeguard services for next year using tourism tax dollars. So how did I do that? As aquatic professionals, we already collect a ton of data that as part of best practice operations. You know, Scott was mentioning you need to keep track of your incident reports and who's on the beach and things like that. And I use the data that I've been collecting over the past decade to get some numbers together that provided a really strong case for having tourism tax in Duluth support our lifeguards. The first thing I looked at was our incident report logs. We always ask for contact information from people that we give first aid to or other assistance to. And I found that 80% of those incident report logs had out of our area addresses and phone numbers. There's a life jacket loaner station at our beach house where our lifeguards are stationed, and that's supplied by the Coast Guard Auxiliary. They ask that people sign a waiver and give their contact information. And again, we found that 75% of those life jackets that were signed out from people outside our immediate community. And there's similar data that we were able to pull from the Duluth Fire Department. Our downtown rig number 1 is the responding unit when there's a water emergency and lifeguards are not present. So we were able to gather data from Duluth Fire that has very similar statistics. So we were going to be very deliberate, or we plan to be very deliberate this season in keeping track of where people are from, so that we can continue to provide data that supports this use of tourism funds, the very same fund that brings people to this community to help keep them safe when they get here. So what makes our program successful? Partnerships, partnerships, partnerships. The Duluth area community is really fantastic at partnerships. We have a great partnership between the City of Duluth Park and Rec Department, the Fire Department, the Duluth Y, and Minnesota Sea Grant to provide education and awareness of rip currents in our community, as well as get lifeguards on the beach, get people out on the beach on red flag days, where dangerous conditions are present and get some education out there. We also have started to develop some great partnerships with the Minnesota DNR Coastal Program. And all of us together put up a billboard on Highway 35 that comes up to Duluth that gives the real-time conditions website to try to drive people to at least get the information before they get to the beach. And then creative funding sources. I would have never thought about tourism tax until somebody pointed it out to me, but think outside the box. There's a lot of different places that you can get some funding from to help support, or at least gain some traction to get some support. Even if you don't completely fund it, every little bit helps. And anytime that you can find some of these resources or partnerships, you just never know who's going to be able to give you some information or some money or some help. Even if it's just feet on the beach to try to gain data for a season before you say, we're heavy with tourists on the beach, let's do something about it. Anything can help. So next time you see something like this, maybe you should think, do I have tourism tax? Because tourists are coming, tourists are paying us to be here. Let's use that money that they've given us to provide a safety service for them.
Cheryl, that was great. Oh my gosh, you have such a great program there in Duluth. Thank you so much for being with us today and sharing all this great information. So many reasons for having a lifeguard program, so many ways, so many justifications. You talked a little bit about liability, so did Scott. And next we have an expert on that, a risk management expert, Tim Jaskiewicz. And he is from an organization that had a speaker at one of our big conferences in the Chicagoland area a couple of years ago, which gave us some really eye-opening information. And now Tim's going to share that as well as some updates. So Tim, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Jamie. So like Jamie said, I'm Tim Jaskiewicz with the Park District Risk Management Agency in Illinois. We go by PDRMA. Around here, there seems to be a culture of lifeguards, which is a good thing. You know, we have lifeguards on the lakes. Obviously, Chicago is probably the biggest known one. They're not one of our members, but they're probably the biggest known in our area for lifeguarding. But the picture behind me is Gilson Beach in Wilmette, and we have a bunch of other members who lifeguard their beaches regularly, Winnetka, Highland Park, Lake Bluff. And it's always been kind of a culture around here, but there's a lot of tough decisions being made now. So I want to really concentrate on the risk management piece of it, providing lifeguards, and looking at staffing levels, if it's a good option to have lifeguards, and kind of weighing that risk, that management, and that balance. So I'm going to start with this, the risk management continuum. So there's three ways to kind of look at risk management. Are you being reactive, which is responding to events once something's already occurred? Do you have a comprehensive program, which is managing of a specific risk on an individual basis? Or are you being proactive, which is integrating and incorporating risk management into your strategies, systems, and operations? So let me give you a brief example of these. So say you have a beachgoer coming to your beach, and they're walking down the beach and they cut their foot on a piece of metal. The reactive risk manager would say, well, we got to get rid of that piece of metal. We'll pay their hospital bills and then go on our way. The comprehensive risk management would be doing maybe beach inspections, making sure there's not things on the beach that can injure your beachgoers. And the proactive approach would be having safety committees or safety teams that would meet regularly and discuss not only those inspections, but other things, other trends on your beaches, trends that might be occurring on beaches in your surrounding area, and discussing those and coming up with plans to mitigate the risk for all those different things. So kind of think about where you're at. And I bring this up because, and I talk about this because your agency's safety culture sets the tone for and the direction for the decision-making that you are going to be moving forward with. And deciding on whether lifeguarding is part of that program is important. So this is kind of high level thinking, and probably needs to be done with your boards or who's ever kind of overseeing the whole operation. So let me talk kind of about balancing the risk. And I'm going to start here. There's a value to going to the beach. I think everybody would agree that there's a value to opening up your beaches. You're providing play for kids, exercise maybe for some people, There's a socialization aspect, maybe not now, but definitely a socialization aspect. It's fun. It's fun to go to the beach. So you want to open up your beaches, but obviously there's that risk out there. There's that drowning risk. There's the potential for death on the beach. So then as a risk manager, we look at ways to either eliminate that risk or minimize the risk. And eliminating would be easy, I guess, if you just put up a big fence on your beach and didn't allow anyone on the sand or in the water. The problem with eliminating it is you're also eliminating that fun, the exercising, the socialization aspect. So then we look into minimizing the risk. And that's where kind of risk management comes in, and where our job comes in, is we want to minimize the risk on the beaches. We have all sorts of ways to minimize that risk. What we call here at Podtburg is our risk management toolkit. So the toolkit involves these things that you can read on the screen there. And there's loss prevention, which would be preventing something bad from happening, which is kind of where your lifeguards fall in. You're preventing a drowning from happening, hopefully. And then you have loss control. So that'd be minimizing the impact of an incident after it happens. Some of these things can kind of fall into both categories, like ordinances, for example. You might have an ordinance that says your beach is closed at dusk. And somebody might come by after the sun sets and read the sign and say, oh, I'm not gonna swim, it's closed, and you just prevented that person from going in the water and possibly drowning. But it also is a loss control measure in that you had that ordinance out there, and now you're controlling your legal defenses, because when that person does drown and their family sues you, you have that defense that our ordinance said they could not be swimming. They were a non-permitted user at that time. So I'm not going to go through each one of these because we're focused on lifeguards today, but we have signage, inspections, corrective action, risk transfer, waivers, and then I kind of feel like supervision and training go hand in hand. If you're going to supervise the beaches, you're going to have lifeguards on the beaches. It's important that they go through the proper training, that they're a good quality lifeguard, they know what they're doing, and that they have good training when they get up in the chair, up in the tower. So as we reflect on the risk, there's two ways to look at that. You have your risk appetite, which is the amount of risk that your organization is willing to take on to meet their goals. And then you have risk tolerance, which is the willingness for that organization to accept or avoid the risk. So in this case that we're talking about today, the appetite would be opening up your beaches, and the tolerance is whether you're going to lifeguard those beaches or not. Another way to kind of look at this from a municipality standpoint is your risk appetite may be setting a certain speed limit. If you have a highway running through your town, maybe they set that speed limit at 70 miles an hour, because after 70 miles an hour, you know, traffic accidents get a lot worse. There's bigger chance for casualties. So 70 miles an hour is your appetite for risk, and that's where you're going to set that at. The tolerance would be how many patrol cars are you putting on the highway or on that stretch of highway to monitor the speed limits? Or if there's patrol cars out there and they pull someone over, are they pulling them over at 71 miles an hour, or are they pulling them over at 80 miles an hour? So that's where the tolerance piece comes in. So we look at this appetite and tolerance as we're kind of moving forward and making the decisions on whether to have a lifeguard program. Next, we have to talk about legal duty. So is there a duty to provide lifeguards on your beaches? That legal duty might come from your local municipality, your Department of Public Health, your state, county, whatever it is. And a fundamental part of tort law, which tort is a wrongful act against someone. So a fundamental concept from tort law is that unless a defendant owes the duty of care to the plaintiff and they've breached that duty, the plaintiff cannot recover damages for negligence. And this is where the struggle comes in that if you don't owe the duty to supervise, and a lot of people put up a sign, say no lifeguard on duty, and that's all they have to do. And then choosing to take on that responsibility can add some liability, and that you really need to be focused on your staffing levels, your scheduling, your training, and realize that you are taking on a little bit of extra liability. But in doing that, you can really prevent drownings, and that's kind of what we're looking at, and why agencies take on that duty, prevent the drownings. So I think this was covered kind of already by Scott and Cheryl, but some of the advantages and disadvantages if you have a lifeguard on duty. Obviously, the main advantage is preventing those drownings. You have some more oversight and control of your beaches. You can collect fees. And then the disadvantages that everyone talks about is probably the cost of starting up that program. You have to train them well. You have to have them scheduled properly. And then another one would be, another disadvantage would probably be that you're adding an extra exposure. You're putting lifeguards out there, so you're adding exposure in that the lifeguards can get injured performing rescues, jumping off towers, whatever it may be, training. So those are a few disadvantages. What on the right side of the screen there, that CDC lifeguard effectiveness report of the working group from the CDC, they note in there that, or they estimate that having a beach protected by lifeguards can lessen the chance of a drowning to 1 in 18 million by just having lifeguards on your beach. It really decreases the amount. And they mentioned that there's no doubt that trained professional lifeguards have a positive effect on drowning prevention in the United States. So I encourage you to kind of take a look at that. They have some other really good information in that lifeguard effectiveness, and they've done some studies on the costs of drownings in communities and the cost to not lifeguard after a drowning occurs. And I know Scott kind of touched on that a little bit as well. So there's these things called tort immunities. Illinois has them. I believe most states in the United States have tort immunities of some type set up. And these protect the employers or the municipalities from frivolous lawsuits, basically. So the legislation has said that for public entities and employees, based on an understanding that in certain circumstances, it's going to be more important to use tax money and revenue for public services rather than defending lawsuits and paying out claims for injury. So that's where the kind of tort immunities come in. So an example would be non-aquatic related. If somebody's walking down the block in front of your city hall, they trip on your sidewalk, it's no fault of the village, but they're going to file a lawsuit. And they have the right to file the lawsuit, even with the tort immunities. But the tort immunity is going to help defend that case and say that, you have to be willful and wanton in your conduct, the agency does. And so basically a plaintiff has to prove that you were willful and wanton in your conduct. That means they have to show that you were actual or deliberately intentional in the harm you caused. So that sort of brings me to the supervisory immunity and being willful and wanton standards. And this applies especially to them if there's no duty to supervise. However, by showing that you're putting lifeguards on and they're well trained, you are showing a conscious regard for the safety of the people who are coming to swim at your facility or your beach. You're showing a deference, not an indifference for their safety. You're showing that there's an intent to enhance and promote the safety of your beachgoers. And even if someone comes to your beach and a judge or jury were to say that they didn't do everything correctly, or your agency didn't do everything correctly, but they showed that you had a conscious regard for the safety of the patrons or the people on the beach, you were showing a deference for their safety, you're enhancing and promoting their safety. I mean, you're hardly willful and wanton at that point. You're showing all these things that you care about those people coming to your beach. You posted lifeguards to reduce drownings, to help out patrons, and you're showing a conscious regard and a deference for their safety. So hopefully that allows you to sleep a little bit better at night, kind of shows that conscious regard for the as a defense in court and for the court of a public opinion as well. And so I encourage you to kind of think about those things if you don't have a lifeguard program or you're considering getting rid of your lifeguard program and how they can kind of help you out. Also, make sure you're talking to your specific councils or your corporate councils, so that you understand the laws and the different aspects in your specific areas. I kind of know Illinois, but I know they're different in different places.
Tim, thanks. Go ahead and stop sharing your screen. That was great. I really like that well-balanced approach to what we're talking about today. And you gave many good examples of reasons and arguments to justify a lifeguard program. And obviously the people in your area, the people that work with you, that consult with you, have chosen on the side of safety and not just putting up signs. I always envision, these mayors and city managers and township supervisors, they know it's the right thing to do. They know they want to keep their residents and their visitors safe, but all it takes is one, city attorney or consultant saying, you know, you're better off just putting up a sign. That's all you need to do. And then they follow that instead of doing the right thing. So these are more arguments for doing the right thing and being on the side of prevention and avoiding those tragedies. So thank you for that. Mark, what's going on in the chat? Do we have some questions or comments we can share, or should we just start asking each other questions?
You know, there was one that came in, kind of a liability question. Who would be responsible for health care for a lifeguard in the event of an injury to the lifeguard? So I think that just came into the panelists, and maybe that's something that Tim could comment on.
Yeah, here in Illinois, if the lifeguard gets injured while at work, it's typically the responsibility of the agency, which then is our Park District Risk Management Agency, pays those claims and assists with that, and we have a claims department here. So in Illinois, that's the way it works. I don't know if that's the assumption everywhere, but I guess it depends on how your work comp laws work in different areas. I see Cheryl shaking her head, so it sounds like maybe Minnesota is very similar to Illinois in that case, in those cases.
Cheryl, Scott, do you have anything to add?
And I can tell you that if a lifeguard gets injured, you know, that the likelihood of that is far lower than if a first responder gets injured trying on a body recovery. The risk there is a lot greater. We had a double drowning here in Duluth in 2018, and it was an epic wave day. But there were a couple of fire responders that ended up going to the hospital because of the time they spent in the water looking for people. And if we had had lifeguards on the beach or park rangers on the beach to try to encourage these people to not go in the water, those were costs that may not have ever been accrued. You know, it's hard to say if that's the case, but you know, we like to lean that way and say that those people would have made a different choice had there been someone there to educate them a little bit.
In Ontario, if I can jump in, we have the Workplace Safety Insurance Board, which would cover employees who get injured on the job. That also means that pre-season, we have to go through health and safety training review each year for our employees. So if I was to jump off a tower and sprain an ankle, it would go through the worker safety insurance that our employer holds, that they would cover my healthcare fees.
To your knowledge, is there a shortage of lifeguards these days, or are there enough trained lifeguards right now to fill the areas that use them?
There is a shortage of lifeguards, predominantly in pools, where people have to shell out a great deal of money in courses and training first, and that's not appealing to some people who they can get a job working retail at the mall and get a store discount on top of that. There's been some incentives that employers in our area have tried to put in. The beach, fortunately, I'll say it is always attractive. People see people sitting up in a lifeguard chair and think that's a great way to get a summer job. Finding good quality lifeguards to work in the Great Lakes, which are basically freshwater seas, is the challenge. I know that Adam Abazian, who works down just outside of Chicago, he says he gets a whole bunch of recruits just through his summer aquatic camps that he runs, that the lifeguards help out in the morning with the sailing camp, and then later on the kids who went through sailing camp say, hey, I want to do my part now and become a lifeguard and an instructor.
Cheryl, anything to add?
We were doing a little bit better, especially, you know, with the pool lifeguard situation until the pandemic put a damper on how we're able to train. So that we have a shortage of trained lifeguards currently. There's a lot. I've got a long list of people waiting to get into classes, but you know, just you can't practice rescues when you can't be 6 feet. You know, that whole I'm gonna rescue you with a pole, maybe we'll go back to that, but so it's tricky. Like we're struggling a little bit with the lifeguards that we have that have current certifications, but we're doing the best that we can.
Good. Tim, I imagine it's the same in your area?
Yeah, before the pandemic, I was hearing a lot of struggles to find lifeguards because they were accepting other jobs where they didn't have to, like Scott was saying, shell out the money up front to to get the certification, things like that. So in our area, before the pandemic, a lot of groups were getting together and different aquatic groups and just kind of sharing ideas on how they were recruiting guards, how they were retaining lifeguards, where they were getting guards from. And so there were some really good ideas that came out of some of those meetings from what I understand. I wasn't at all of them, but I know just sharing with your neighbors and getting ideas can be a big help. Since the pandemic, I haven't heard any issues. I think there's still some lifeguards out there who are holding out hope that their facilities would open, especially the pools. The beaches are kind of saying, yeah, we were going to open either way.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm going to remind people of a few things, and then I'm going to introduce a special guest in a minute. Our water safety wheel, you can get a PDF or JPEG of this if you email me. This is a nice graphic developed by Matt Gillen of the National Weather Service with some of our key messages that we want everybody to know top of mind, share with others, because these can really help save lives. Know before you go, checking with the weather forecast to see what the conditions are. We have QR codes on our beach warning signs that'll take you right to a site that shows the current warnings and conditions. Steer clear of the pier, especially with the high water levels. You can get knocked off very easily. If you jump off, water's cold, you can have a gasp reflex and drown. Lots of dangers on piers and break walls. So enjoy them safely. If you're going to do it, make sure it's safe. Have a flotation device, have a life jacket. We don't want to say no to people, but we want to say safely enjoy yourself. Break the grip of the rip. Don't try to fight the current. Even an Olympic swimmer can't swim to the side, back to shore. If you do get in trouble, flip, float, and follow is the best advice, just like stop, drop, and roll if you catch on fire. Stay dry when waves are high. Even 2 to 3 foot waves can generate rip currents and other dangerous currents around structures. And the number one piece of advice is don't just bring your life jacket, wear it. And then we also want to remind you that our signs are available. We got a new shipment in, and we're ready to send them out to anybody that wants them to keep their beaches safer and warn people. Our brochures, the ink is probably dry by now, but these are brand new, and they're shipping all over the Great Lakes area to people who are helping us distribute them, and we'd love it if you would be one of them. And then we also have these new placemats we introduced last week for home or for restaurants, and they have a lot of beach safety tips and reminders with our key messages built in. So that's a fun way to help educate kids about and adults about how to stay safe in and around the water. And then again, we're a nonprofit. We need donations. We appreciate them very much. All the donations go straight to our water safety initiatives and efforts. So please donate generously and help us out to continue our important work. So as you've heard so far today, lifeguards are essential to keeping people safe in and around the water. The two main excuses of budget and liability are no longer good excuses. There is money available, and there are ways to have a lifeguard program pay for itself. And again, lifeguards are far cheaper than rescue helicopters and dive teams. And there are water safety fundamentals and innovations that we need in the mix at both guarded or unguarded beaches. One of them is flag systems. They can be controversial. We haven't officially endorsed them because there are many factors involved in managing and maintaining them effectively throughout the day, which not all beach managers can guarantee. But joining us today to introduce a possible solution is Jake Soder from Michigan Tech. Jake, you want to introduce yourself and show us what you got?
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name's Jacob Soder. I'm a student at Michigan Tech. We've been involved working with the Great Lakes Water Safety Conference for a number of years now, working on different technologies and solutions to try to help reduce drowning in the Great Lakes and abroad. And I'd like to show you a solution that we're working on right now. I introduced to you Swim Smart warning systems. And it began a few years ago. We were at a conference, another Great Lakes Water Safety Conference, where they were talking about beach warning flags. They were talking about the pros and cons of the system. And one thing that stood out to us is that it takes a lot of time to change these flags every day, and it can kind of be a burden on the lifeguards. Also, the weather can change rather rapidly, and the flags may not always reflect exactly what you expect. So we thought there has to be a better way, some way we can make this a little more automatic. And what we ended up coming up with is what we like to call the beach traffic light. It's essentially just a small LED tower that can be controlled either using a cell phone or a computer. And by removing the bottleneck of having to change the flag every day and sending a person out, this opens up many more opportunities to increase public safety. Unlike warning flags, the LED system can be changed instantly from any location with a computer or phone. This can actually prove to be a pretty valuable tool for lifeguards, as they now have the ability to change multiple flags in basically an instant. Some flags that are even far away. And this frees up time for lifeguards and allows them to focus on what makes them so valuable, watching over the public. There are other solutions that exist, and some of the panelists have talked about them, like the highway warning signs with scrolling LEDs. They do work, but they're very expensive and actually are unreliable at times. And then of course, just regular metal warning signs, which they require no maintenance. But the problem is, as Cheryl said, a lot of people won't understand them, and you can only convey so much information on a sign. Well, our goal is to provide something that can change in real time, and it's very simple. So to truly understand how a community can benefit from our system, I'd like to go through a quick case study. There is a real beach in a small city that has implemented a flag system. The beach is notorious for rip currents. I'm going to keep the beach name anonymous just out of respect for the beach allowing us to do this case study. The beach is a popular hangout for tourists at the city. There are about 7 miles of beachfront, a small peninsula. There exists 4 beach warning flags located at different parts of the beach. There are lifeguards posted at the main swimming spots. It takes approximately 1 hour to change the 4 flags every day. And on the beach, the flags are maintained by the fire department. They are typically changed first thing in the morning. The lifeguards themselves do not actually change the flags, as the flag program is managed by the city, not the YMCA. If a red flag is out on the beach is technically closed to promote public safety. However, there have been instances where the flag was left out the night before and is still red, so the beach is still technically closed. And as a result, the lifeguards are instructed not to go out. People will still go out and swim because the waters may be clear, but the lifeguards are not out there. Another issue is the beach runs for 7 miles, and only a portion of it is recommended to swimming area. Many parts of the beach are simply next to private property and are not used frequently and not guarded. And finally, warnings can only go so far. Due to a lack of consistency with the flag system, some residents tend to neglect or distrust the system, because at times it's just wrong. For example, a red flag left out in a crystal clear day. People don't believe the flag. Also, warnings are exactly that, they're warnings. Signs, flags, or even LED systems cannot physically save someone like a lifeguard can, which is why lifeguards are the best and first option for safety. So in the end, the flag system, despite its good intentions, has hindered lifeguards from performing their duty at times. Of course, the flag system also has good intentions and has its uses. It was created to complement lifeguards, not hinder them. Yet the flags have obvious benefits. So I ask all of you to ponder this. What would you do if you were in charge? Would you give the lifeguards the ability to change the flags? Allow the lifeguards to go out on red flag days? Pay someone else to change them? Maybe abandon the flags altogether? This is where connected devices would come in handy. I believe this is a great situation for our beach traffic lights to provide real value to a community. Our strategy would free up the fire department and lifeguards from the fallbacks of the current flag system. The LEDs could be situated near entrances, bathrooms, boardwalks, fountains, or any other structure. And since they are controlled remotely, the warnings can be updated immediately. In the end, a tool like this could help the community immensely. I know that was quick, so I'd just like to thank everybody for listening to the presentation and thank Jamie for giving me the time to present. We've been working very hard to get a reliable and cost-effective design working, and I'm excited to say we're looking for a very small handful of individuals who may be interested in testing the devices for us. If you know anyone who may be interested in getting their hands on one or just interested in learning more, my contact information is available there.
Jake, that was great. Thank you so much. You've done a great job over the years on various innovations, and this is the latest one, and we just can't wait to try it out. So we'll reach out to more of our members and see who wants to be a part of the pilot program for this. One question I'm just interested in from Scott and Cheryl, what is your most memorable or one of your most memorable rescues? Cheryl?
Just laying in the sand, you know, water up to his knees, floating around. Mom is, of course, on the beach, nose in the phone, and the kid is hopping along with his older brothers and falls off the sandbar into a hole, wearing a life jacket, properly fitted by a lifeguard, and just starts freaking out and screaming. Mom doesn't notice. Mom doesn't look up. Brothers are off swimming around somewhere. And so my lifeguard got in the water to pull a kid out of water that was, you know, chest deep at most, who was wearing a life jacket and panicking because he couldn't stand up anymore. Best kind of rescue there is.
Wow. Scott, what about you?
We've had a number, like I said, I'm into summer number 23 up on the beach there. We've had a number of rescues over the years, including 2 rescues that resulted in successful resuscitations as well. So those are huge. The one that come to mind, and I kind of typed the answer, is about a year or so ago, we have a parasail company that works. And while they were out one day, the cable to the canopy broke. So here you have 2 riders who are drifting down slowly, but the wind is carrying them across beach. They end up hitting into the water in probably about 3-foot waves. The canopy still being inflated kind of dragged them through the water up over our pier and into the riverside. Now you have mates on the boat jumping in off the nose. They're fully clothed. So all of the lifeguards were off the towers, running down into the pier, pulled out 4 people, including one of the riders who on the impact with the pier broke her arm. So that was a memorable one.
One of many. Thank you for coming up with that on the spot. So I guess we can start to wrap things up. This has been just so great, so informative. I want to thank our sponsors again, and I want to remind everybody that we do have one more of these virtual jam sessions next week. We have another bonus session. This one's on watercraft and safe boating. We tend to focus near shore where a lot of the people are, but there's a lot of people out in the open water too, plus rivers and streams and inland lakes with kayaks and other paddles. We've got a lot of ground to cover there, and we're going to have a couple people from the Coast Guard, as well as Drew Ferguson from Fast Star and Dan Metcalf from Ontario. So looking forward to next week's. With that, I think we can just wrap it up. Thank you all to all of our speakers and all your time and dedication and everything that you do to help keep people safe. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for tuning in.